Thanks so much. You're up to date on the markets. Carol Master, Tim Stanovic, live here at Bloomberg headquarters on Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Well, we mentioned Elon Musk calling President Trump's counselor on tariffs, Peter Navarro, a moron. You have U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying there is potential for advantageous trade deals with major U.S. trading partners as foreign nationals appeal to Washington. You've got China vowing to fight to the end on tariffs as it props up its markets. And then we have, what was that market? What was it, 104% tariff from the U.S. on China? It feels like, if it sounds like a trade war, walks like a trade war.
Does it quack like a trade war?
It sounds like, it does feel like it's quacking like a trade war.
I think we can go ahead and call it a trade war. Let's see what Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Policy Analyst Nathan Dean has to say about it. He joins us from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Before we get into what exactly is happening in the White House, Nathan Dean, I'm sure you are getting a lot of questions from clients about this tit for tat. Can we call it a trade war at this point?
You know, I think so. If these tariffs go into fruition tonight at midnight, I think obviously you can, because, you know, we're talking about 104% tariff on China. And, you know, you had Gina Martin Adams on earlier, going from our current, you know, tariff around 5%. That's, you know, pretty substantial and something that we haven't seen in the last, you know, 20, 30, 40, 100 years. So I think obviously we can't say it's a trade war, but the big question that we're getting from clients at the moment is, you know, is this going to go forward? We think so. And then are there going to be Republican pushbacks to that? And we saw that in today's Senate Finance Committee hearing with the Trade Representative, Ambassador Jamieson Greer. You know, you're starting to see little cracks of Republicans pushing back, but not enough to it's actually going to derail President Trump's agenda.
Hey, since you brought up that hearing, what was that all about?
Yeah, so this is the U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Jamieson Greer, who's testifying to the Senate Finance Committee today. House Ways and Means tomorrow. House Ways and Means could have a little bit more fireworks, a little bit more partisan. But really what we saw today was the Trade Representative trying to, you know, defend this strategy of long-term gain for short-term pain. And, you know, we began to see the cracks of uneasiness, specifically from Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina. Now, look, he's running for re-election in 2 years, so I think obviously this is a little bit of trying to get some sound bites in. But, you know, he essentially said, look, and I'm paraphrasing here, whose throat do I have to choke?
I think that's exactly what he said.
Yeah, you know, it's like, whose throat do I have to choke if this doesn't work out? Now, you know, we saw legislation come out last week that tried to claw back some of the president's authority, and this was bipartisan. You know, this was from Senator Grassley of Iowa, a farm state, Senator Maria Cantwell from Washington. But, you know, I don't think that legislation is going to go anywhere, and it certainly wouldn't get anywhere close to overriding a presidential veto. So, you know, for us, we always get the question of when does President Trump change his mind? It's A, if he can make a deal, and, you know, Ambassador Greer said they were talking to 50 countries, and B, are you going to see consumer confidence really get to the point of MacBooks going up 100%, you know, that type of thing. So, you know, I think we're going to be in this situation for some time.
So if we're thinking about this being potentially some sort of deal as an end point to this, what would that deal look like? Because you know, I think there's a lot of questions about what an off-ramp could be for tariffs such as these.
Yeah, I think from the White House perspective, it's just any deal, just to show the market that, look, we are going to be making deals. You know, there was some anticipation that when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was here, they would potentially announce a deal. President Trump was talking with the Prime Minister of Japan, was talking with South Korea today. So the idea of the White House is potentially you would show one deal, and then subsequently you'd be able to see the market reaction saying, hey, not all is going to be bad here. But then as you saw from the China perspective and the China negotiations that are taking place, it looks like there's not really a deal to be had. So, you know, again, we go back to this point where I think you're going to, from the White House strategy, you want to show that deals eventually will come down the line, and AKA there will be exemptions. But until that actually happens, you have to prepare for the worst, and that's what's going to happen.
I mean, Nathan, what's the smart analysis on this? Is this exactly what President Trump wants? He wants people to feel upended and kind of off balance. Or are you guys hearing from your sources in the White House that says, you know what, relax, everybody. Everything's going to work out. There are going to be deals. All these countries really are calling us, and they want to lower tariffs. They want to figure this out. What's the truth here? What's the reality?
Well, you have two groups in the White House. Obviously, you have Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent essentially saying, look, we need to have an end game here. We got to give the markets an end game of what this looks like. But then I go back to today's hearing again, where the Trade Representative Ambassador Greer was saying, look, this is all about trade imbalance. And if you're not buying from China, or if you're buying from China right now and you're going to be paying the price for it, don't buy from China. Buy from the United States, buy somewhere else. And I think that's the thinking that's in the White House at the moment, is this idea of fundamentally changing the supply chain of the world order. And so I think, Peter Navarro said it when he was on TV this morning, essentially saying, look, we're going to be making iPhones in the United States. I think that's the thinking that's driving the White House at the moment.
Yeah, well, I can't afford a $3,000 or $4,000 iPhone. I'm just going to say that. Having said that, who's in charge ultimately, especially when we're getting different things from members of the administration and it feels like different messaging? I mean, ultimately, is this what these folks are being told to do by the president, like kind of throw out some different things? Because ultimately, it's going to be up to the president, right, what he wants to do. But I'm just trying to understand how the messaging is managed.
Yeah, so, it is up to the president. He's the one that makes the final decision. But I will say that, President Trump, and we saw this in his first term, and we're starting to see it again in his second term, he's one of those leaders where he doesn't come out and say, look, this is what the strategy is. This is what I want to go with. He lets people essentially go out and create their own strategies, and then they come back and then they fight about it. And then ultimately he'll pick one. He'll reverse it, pick another one, then he'll come back to the original idea, but then he'll make his decision, and then it's always up for negotiation. That's not good for the markets. The markets want clarity. But what we can say is that, President Trump, we do believe, wants these tariffs to go forward. He doesn't feel that he's paying a political price for them at the moment, and he's certainly not getting any political pressure from Republicans that want to overchallenge his authority. And so we do think that these tariffs are going to go in, and they may go in for some time because the Senate's leaving for a 2-week recess, and they're not going to be here until the end of the month.
It does seem like this time is different. And when I talk about time, I mean the president's first term. He had the chance to do tariff policy like this. He had a chance to renegotiate NAFTA, and he did with the USMCA. But even now, he says that wasn't good enough. That was his trade deal. Is this time different because it is his second term, and he doesn't care about political consequences?
Well, I think he cares about political consequences, but I also feel that he was sort of held back in his first term and that he wanted to proceed with this. But, moderate voices in the Washington establishment had said, no, Mr. President, let's pull you back and let's do it this way. Now, President Trump obviously won the election. He won it by, 77 million, or he won it with 77 million votes. And he won all 7 swing states, and he consistently comes back to this idea that there's a mandate. Now, most presidents in their second terms feel that they have mandates, but they only have about 18 months to use that political capital before Congress begins to say, no, we have to focus on midterms, and then we have to focus on the next election. Right. So presidents, whether it's President Obama or President Trump, you come out hard, and you say, this is what we're going to do, and you keep going.
Nathan, 30 seconds. It is about tariffs, but it's also about energy deals. It's also about defense positions, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes into these negotiations. It's not just about tariffs. Just quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, you have any sense of geopolitical order. I mean, in terms of trade imbalances, defense, energy, investments in the United States. All of this coalesces at the cabinet level and then eventually goes to the White House or the president's desk.
It's only Tuesday, Lemon. All right, Nathan, thank you so much. So appreciate it. Nathan D.